A slap in the middle of a crowded airplane might seem like a simple outburst, until the woman at the center of it drops a bombshell. When this woman's true identity is revealed, everyone on board is forced to reconsider everything they thought they knew. This is a story of secrets, power, and a moment that changed everything. Subscribe, and let us know which city you're watching from. The flight seemed like any other. The seats were cramped, the air thick with the smell of reheated food. A few people were already dozing off, while others were busy watching movies on their screens. Nothing unusual, nothing worth remembering. At least, that's what it seemed like at first. Then came the woman. She boarded late, her eyes scanning the cabin as she walked down the aisle. She was in her 40s, dressed in a long flowing coat, with perfectly styled hair and a confident stride. She didn't look out of place, but something about her attitude was immediately noticeable. She had an air of entitlement, one that seemed to radiate with every step she took. The flight attendant, Tara, was a seasoned pro, accustomed to dealing with all sorts of passengers. She'd seen it all: grumpy business travelers, loud families, and even the occasional crying baby. But nothing prepared her for this. The woman took her seat, not far from the front of the plane, in the middle of the economy class section. She didn't make eye contact with anyone, not even with Tara, who was busy helping passengers settle in. As Tara passed by, she noticed the woman's eyes flicker briefly to her, but there was no smile, no acknowledgement, just a cold, indifferent stare. Moments passed, and Tara continued her routine, serving drinks, helping people with their bags, and making small talk with the passengers. But there was a strange energy in the air around that woman. She seemed to be watching, calculating every move Tara made. Then, things took a turn. Tara approached the woman's seat to offer a drink. The woman's sharp voice sliced through the calmness of the cabin. "Excuse me," she snapped, glaring at Tara. "This seat is uncomfortable. I demand an upgrade." Tara, taken aback, smiled politely as she always did. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the flight is fully booked. There are no available upgrades at this time." The woman's eyes narrowed. "I don't care. I paid good money for this ticket, and I expect better service." Tara's smile faded, but she remained calm. "I understand, ma'am. I'll check with the captain to see if there's anything we can do." But before Tara could walk away, the woman grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "No, I want it now. Do your job properly." The entire row of passengers shifted in their seats, uncomfortable with the scene unfolding before them. Tara pulled her arm away gently, trying to maintain professionalism, but the tension was palpable. "I'll speak to the captain for you, ma'am," Tara repeated, her tone more firm now, but still respectful. The woman's face twisted into a look of disgust. "You're just like all the others. Always making excuses. You're nothing but a lowly flight attendant. Do you even know who I am?" she hissed, her voice dripping with disdain. Tara felt the sting of the insult, but she kept her composure. "I'm just here to ensure you have a comfortable flight, ma'am." The woman's eyes narrowed further. She leaned forward in her seat, her voice low and mocking. "I don't think you understand who you're dealing with. You should be careful with how you talk to me." And with that, everything shifted. Tara, who had been holding herself together, suddenly snapped. Without thinking, she raised her hand, and in one swift motion, she slapped the woman across the face. The sound echoed through the cabin. For a moment, no one moved. The entire plane seemed frozen in time. Passengers looked around, unsure of what had just happened. Tara's hand hovered in the air, her palm still stinging from the contact. The woman sat there, stunned, her face red from the slap. But what came next shocked everyone even more. She didn't scream. She didn't retaliate. Instead, she looked up at Tara, her eyes now softening, a flicker of something else in them. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she spoke. "I'm sorry." The plane fell completely silent. Tara blinked, trying to process what was happening. The woman, who had just moments before seemed so full of anger and entitlement, now seemed different, vulnerable almost. This wasn't what anyone had expected. Tara stood there, unsure of what to do next. She had never, in all her years of flying, had a passenger apologize after such an encounter. And certainly, no one had ever slapped anyone in the middle of a flight before. But something about the woman's quiet apology made Tara pause. The entire plane seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would happen next. In that moment, something deep shifted in the air. The tension wasn't gone, but it had changed. The woman's words, her revelation, left everyone in the cabin wondering. What was her story? What was the truth behind the cold, demanding woman sitting in seat 12C? As the seconds passed, Tara felt herself torn between walking away and waiting for an explanation. But the rest of the flight was far from over, and the true reason for that slap was something no one could have predicted. The silence that followed the slap was thick, suffocating even. Tara stood frozen in place, her heart pounding not from anger but from an overwhelming sense of confusion. What had just happened? She had slapped the woman, something she never thought she'd do in a million years. But the woman's sudden apology left Tara unsure of how to respond. The passengers around them were equally stunned. A few of them exchanged quick glances, their eyes wide. Others stared straight ahead, unwilling to look directly at the scene unfolding. It was as if the whole plane was holding its breath, waiting for something more, something to make sense of this strange moment. The woman, still seated in her chair, slowly lifted her hand to her cheek where Tara's slap had left a faint pink mark. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if collecting herself. Tara, despite her shock, took a hesitant step forward. "I didn't mean to do that," Tara said softly, her voice shaking with a mix of guilt and uncertainty. The woman didn't look at her right away. Instead, she kept her gaze fixed on the seat in front of her, as if searching for the right words. Then, after a long pause, she spoke again, her voice quieter this time. I didn't think anyone would care." Her words were slow, almost as if she were speaking to herself. "I didn't think anyone would ever see past all this." Tara didn't know what to say. The woman had been so cold and demanding, so wrapped up in her own world of entitlement. But now, there was something vulnerable in her tone. "I'm sorry," Tara repeated, unsure if it was enough. "I didn't mean to hit you, I was trying to help." The woman finally looked up at her, and there was something in her eyes. Something Tara couldn't quite place. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't frustration. It was sadness? Regret? "I know you were," the woman replied quietly. "And I'm sorry too. I shouldn't have acted that way. But I was so angry and scared." Tara frowned. Scared? Of what? The woman's eyes flickered down to her hands, which were now clasped tightly in her lap. She took a deep breath, then whispered, "I've been hiding for so long. Pretending like everything's fine. Pretending I'm someone I'm not. But inside, I'm not okay." The words hit Tara like a punch to the gut. What was she hearing? This woman, who had seemed so confident, so above it all, was now speaking like she had been broken down, like the weight of something had been too much for her to carry. "I don't know why I said those things to you," the woman continued. I just wanted to feel like I mattered, like I wasn't invisible, like I wasn't just forgotten." Tara's chest tightened. She had no idea what this woman had been through, what kind of life she had been living. But in that moment, something shifted. The woman's tears began to form, slowly, silently, as she blinked them away. "My daughter, she's gone. I've been hiding it, trying to be strong, but it hurts so much. She was everything to me, and now she's just gone." Tara stood still, her heart sinking. She had no idea that this woman's coldness had been masking something far deeper than she could have imagined. The woman wasn't angry because of a seat or a drink. She wasn't upset over some minor inconvenience. She was grieving. She had been grieving for a long time, and the mask she wore, the one that made her seem so tough, so unapproachable, was all she had left to protect herself. The passengers around them seemed to feel the shift too. There was no more tension in the air, no more discomfort. The atmosphere had softened, like a weight had been lifted. It wasn't just about the slap anymore. It wasn't about the demands or the anger. It was about something far more human, something Tara could understand all too well. "I'm so sorry," Tara whispered, her voice full of sincerity. "I had no idea. I had no idea what you were going through." The woman finally met Tara's gaze, her expression one of relief, like a dam had broken. "It's just, I didn't know who else to talk to. I couldn't tell anyone. I've been alone in this." The truth hung in the air between them. The woman wasn't just a passenger with an attitude problem. She was a mother, a grieving woman, someone who had lost everything and was struggling to find a way to keep going. And in her anger, she had lashed out at the one person who had no idea what she was really going through. "I didn't want anyone to see me as weak," the woman continued, her voice barely a whisper. "I thought if I acted like I didn't care, maybe I wouldn't feel so empty inside. But now, I don't know what to do." Tara, unsure of how to comfort her, simply sat down beside the woman, her presence offering a quiet sense of support. The hum of the plane and the soft chatter of other passengers seemed distant now. In this moment, it was just the two of them. "I don't have the answers," Tara said, her voice steady but gentle. "But I'm here for you. You don't have to carry this alone." The woman's eyes welled up again, but this time there was a sense of release. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, letting the tears flow. It was as though, after all this time, she had finally found someone who cared, someone who didn't see her as just another demanding passenger, but as a person with a story, with pain, and with a need for understanding. Tara didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know how the rest of the flight would unfold. But she knew one thing. This moment, this connection, had changed everything. The flight wasn't just about getting from one place to another anymore. It was about people. It was about seeing beyond the surface and understanding that everyone, every single person, has a story. And sometimes, that story is more than just anger or frustration. It's pain, loss, and the quiet struggle of trying to survive in a world that often doesn't care. As Tara sat there beside the woman, she realized something profound. You never really know what someone is going through until you look deeper. And in a world full of judgment and assumptions, a simple act of kindness can be the thing that makes all the difference. The passengers around them seemed to feel the shift too. There was no more tension in the air, no more discomfort. The atmosphere had softened, like a weight had been lifted. It wasn't just about the slap anymore. It wasn't about the demands or the anger. It was about something far more human, something Tara could understand all too well. "I'm so sorry," Tara whispered, her voice full of sincerity. "I had no idea. I had no idea what you were going through." The woman finally met Tara's gaze, her expression one of relief, like a dam had broken. "It's just, I didn't know who else to talk to. I couldn't tell anyone. I've been alone in this." The truth hung in the air between them. The woman wasn't just a passenger with an attitude problem. She was a mother, a grieving woman, someone who had lost everything and was struggling to find a way to keep going. And in her anger, she had lashed out at the one person who had no idea what she was really going through. "I didn't want anyone to see me as weak," the woman continued, her voice barely a whisper. "I thought if I acted like I didn't care, maybe I wouldn't feel so empty inside. But now, I don't know what to do." Tara, unsure of how to comfort her, simply sat down beside the woman, her presence offering a quiet sense of support. The hum of the plane and the soft chatter of other passengers seemed distant now. In this moment, it was just the two of them. "I don't have the answers," Tara said, her voice steady but gentle. "But I'm here for you. You don't have to carry this alone." The woman's eyes welled up again, but this time there was a sense of release. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, letting the tears flow. It was as though, after all this time, she had finally found someone who cared, someone who didn't see her as just another demanding passenger, but as a person with a story, with pain, and with a need for understanding. Tara didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know how the rest of the flight would unfold. But she knew one thing. This moment, this connection, had changed everything. The flight wasn't just about getting from one place to another anymore. It was about people. It was about seeing beyond the surface and understanding that everyone, every single person, has a story. And sometimes, that story is more than just anger or frustration. It's pain, loss, and the quiet struggle of trying to survive in a world that often doesn't care. As Tara sat there beside the woman, she realized something profound. You never really know what someone is going through until you look deeper. And in a world full of judgment and assumptions, a simple act of kindness can be the thing that makes all the difference. The rest of the flight was quieter than anyone had expected. The plane, once filled with hushed whispers and nervous glances, now had an almost serene quality to it. Tara and the woman, whose name she learned was Rachel, sat side by side, no longer strangers, but two people who had shared a moment of raw, unfiltered truth. The kind of moment that changes things, shifts perspectives, and makes you question the assumptions you've been holding on to for so long. The flight attendants walked by, their usual routine unaffected by what had transpired. But there was an underlying change, a shift in the air that they probably didn't even realize. People who had been eyeing Rachel with discomfort now glanced at her with empathy. Some even smiled, nodding as if to silently acknowledge the humanity they had just witnessed. Tara glanced over at Rachel, who had stopped crying, but still had that distant, empty look in her eyes. There were no words left between them, just an understanding that seemed to stretch far deeper than anything Tara had ever imagined. But as the plane cruised steadily through the skies, Rachel finally broke the silence again, her voice quiet, but steady. "I didn't think I could tell anyone," Rachel said, staring out the window, her fingers lightly tapping the armrest. "It felt like if I said it out loud, it would make it real. Like I'd be admitting that my daughter was really gone, that there was no way back." Tara watched her, her heart aching. She had no idea what it was like to lose a child, but she could understand that fear. The fear of confronting a loss so deep, it might swallow you whole. "You don't have to do it alone," Tara said softly, turning her body slightly toward Rachel. "It's okay to talk about it, and it's okay to feel broken. You're human." Rachel looked at her for a moment, eyes full of gratitude, but also uncertainty. "I didn't want to seem weak, or like I couldn't handle it. I didn't want people to look at me and think I couldn't get through this." "Nobody's going to think that," Tara reassured her. "Nobody's going to judge you. We all have our breaking points. I think we all pretend to be stronger than we are sometimes." Rachel gave a small smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. The truth of the matter was, she had spent years trying to keep up appearances. In the years following her daughter's death, she had built walls around herself. Walls that made her look like she had everything together, when inside she was falling apart. She had hidden her grief behind a mask of indifference, afraid that if she showed even a crack in that facade, the world would see her as weak. And now, in this unexpected moment on a plane, with a complete stranger sitting next to her, she had allowed herself to crumble, if only just a little. But for Tara, this wasn't just about Rachel. It was about the quiet, unspoken truths of life, about how we often judge others without understanding what they've been through, and how quick we are to make assumptions about people based on their behavior. People like Rachel, Those who seem cold, distant, or even rude often have the heaviest hearts. They're not just difficult for the sake of being difficult. They're difficult because they've been broken, and sometimes the pieces don't fit together the way they used to. "I've been carrying this weight alone for so long," Rachel admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know how to let it go. I didn't know how to face it." Tara listened carefully. She knew she couldn't fix Rachel's pain. No one could. But she could listen, and maybe that would be enough. "You don't have to let it all go right away," Tara said. "It's not about forgetting. It's about allowing yourself to grieve and accepting that it's okay to not have all the answers." Rachel nodded slowly. Her lips trembled, and for a moment, Tara thought she might start crying again. But instead, Rachel took a deep breath and wiped her face with the sleeve of her jacket, steadying herself. "Thank you," Rachel said, her voice thick with emotion. "I didn't think anyone would ever listen. I've been so angry, at myself mostly, but also at the world. It felt like everyone just kept moving on, like my life had stopped the moment she left." Tara put her hand on Rachel's shoulder, a simple gesture that seemed to offer more comfort than words ever could. "Grief doesn't have a timeline," Tara said softly, "and neither does healing. You don't have to rush it. Take all the time you need." For a while, the two of them sat in silence, a comfortable quiet that wasn't awkward, but peaceful. And though Tara didn't have all the answers, she felt that she was exactly where she needed to be in that moment. But something else was happening, something Tara hadn't expected. As Rachel started to open up, as the walls around her began to crumble, Tara realized that she wasn't just learning about Rachel, she was learning about herself too. Sometimes, it takes hearing someone else's pain to realize that you've been hiding your own. It takes someone else's vulnerability to remind you that it's okay to be vulnerable yourself. We all have our own burdens, our own stories. And we often forget that when we meet someone on the street, on a plane, or in a crowded room, we're meeting their story as well. Their struggles, their battles, their hidden pain. It's easy to judge from the outside, to think that someone's behavior is unkind or rude. But what if, instead of condemning them, we stopped for a moment and asked, what are they really going through? As the plane continued its journey, Tara realized that this wasn't just about Rachel. It was about the unspoken truths of life, about the pain we carry, the burdens we hide, and the power of listening, really listening, when someone is brave enough to share. The last hour of the flight passed in a quiet, almost serene way. It was as if the entire plane had been swept into a shared understanding, a silent bond between strangers united by a moment of raw humanity. Tara sat beside Rachel, both of them still processing everything that had been said, the silence between them now comfortable and filled with a sense of unspoken respect. As the plane began its descent, Tara looked out the window. She was tired, yes, but it wasn't the kind of exhaustion that came from a long day of work. It was the kind of tiredness that came from emotional release. A release that came from hearing someone's pain and offering a simple gesture of kindness in return. It was the weight of knowing that, for just a few hours, she had been part of something much bigger than herself. Rachel hadn't said much since their last conversation. She didn't need to. Her eyes, filled with gratitude, spoke volumes. Tara had given her the one thing she had been missing, the courage to speak her truth, to stop hiding behind the walls she had built for so long. When the plane landed, the cabin filled with the usual buzz of people gathering their things, preparing to disembark. The flight attendants, unaware of the emotional exchange that had taken place, moved about the cabin with their usual efficiency. Tara stood up, stretching her legs, and glanced over at Rachel, who was slowly gathering her belongings. As Tara grabbed her bag, Rachel looked up at her, her eyes glistening with something deeper than just gratitude. "Thank you," she said again, her voice quieter now, but this time with a kind of finality to it. I needed this, more than I can say. Tara smiled, feeling the weight of the moment. You don't have to thank me, she replied. Sometimes, all it takes is for someone to listen. Rachel nodded, then paused for a moment before adding, You've made me realize that maybe I'm not alone in this after all. And in that moment, something shifted between them. It wasn't just a moment of shared vulnerability or a simple exchange of words. It was the recognition of something fundamental. That, in a world that often feels divided, the power of kindness and human connection could bridge the widest gaps. It could heal the most broken parts of us. The other passengers had begun to exit the plane, but Tara and Rachel remained for a moment longer, just standing there, taking in the realization that, perhaps for the first time in years, both of them were beginning to let go of their own burdens. Take care of yourself, Tara said, as they finally began to head toward the exit. And remember, you're stronger than you think. Rachel smiled, her eyes brighter now. So are you, she said, her voice filled with a new sense of hope. As they walked off the plane, Tara couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. She knew the world wasn't perfect, and that the struggles Rachel had faced weren't over. But there was a quiet strength in knowing that sometimes all it takes is one person to make a difference. One person to listen, to offer empathy, to show that they care. As Tara stepped into the airport terminal, she realized that the world might be full of broken people, but it was also full of people who could heal each other. In the simplest acts of kindness, the quiet exchanges, the willingness to listen without judgment, we could make the world a little less lonely. And so, as Tara walked away, her heart light, she knew that this encounter had changed both of them. For Rachel, it was a step toward healing, toward confronting the past and moving forward. For Tara, it was a reminder that kindness didn't need to be grand or complicated. It just had to be real. In the end, sometimes the greatest power we have is not to fix someone else's pain, but to be there for them when they need it most. To remind them that they are not alone. To show them that in a world full of judgment, there is still space for understanding, for compassion, and for hope. In a world that moves fast, where people are often quick to judge and slow to listen, remember this: you don't always need to have the answers. Sometimes all someone needs is for you to simply be there, to listen, to understand. You never know how much of a difference a small act of kindness can make. We're all carrying something, some of us heavier burdens than others. But if we can take a moment to see beyond the surface, to recognize that every person has a story, we might just change the world one small act at a time.